What's up, y'all? Alvin here, and today we're talking about outboard jet engines. What are they? How do they work? Why you need one? And most importantly, why you don't need one. I tell the good jokes. Okay, so we get a lot of questions about these outboard jets, and I've done a couple of videos. I'll throw a link up there about outboard jets, different aspects of them and why we use them. But in this video, I want to go a little bit deeper into some of the specifics about these things and how they work. Funny story, we sold a boat recently with an outboard jet on it, and I went to Texas Parks and Wildlife to get the title all taken care of, and there was a little bit of a discrepancy on the title. It said that it was a jet drive boat, inboard jet, which is not what it is. It's an outboard jet. And the guy who works for Texas Parks and Wildlife said, well, either it's an outboard or it's an inboard jet. No such thing as an outboard jet. So I had to show him a picture of it, and he'd never seen one before, never heard of one before. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Thought that maybe a video like this might help somebody else out. Okay, so outboard jets have been around since 1960. I'll leave a link to the Outboard Jets website where they have a lot of the history of jet boats. But yeah, they've been around for a pretty good while. And what it is, you have a regular outboard engine, you take the lower unit off, and you replace it with the jet drive. And what the jet drive does is it sucks water in the bottom. It uses the crankshaft of the engine to spin a big impeller that sucks water into the bottom of the engine, compresses it, and shoots it out the back. So basically, it's like a big nozzle with high pressure water spraying out of the back, and that causes the boat to move forward. Okay, so a couple of interesting things about these outboard jet drives. Number one is they all come from the same place in San Leandro, California, and they make them for any outboard above 25 horsepower. Below 25 horsepower, you end up not having enough power to get your boat on plane. So 25 horsepower and up. We'll explain a little bit later about how that works and why. Okay, so some of the bonuses of these outboard jet drives, just physically, it's a much simpler piece of equipment than an outboard lower unit. There's one bearing, a crankshaft. The impeller is attached to that crankshaft, so there's not really much to go wrong. Maintenance really just consists of, after a run on the river, squirting grease to get any water out of the bearing or the seals. Okay, so why do you want to have an outboard jet drive instead of a conventional propeller drive? The main reason is shallow water. Because of the way the outboard drive works, you've only got about an inch, 2 inches at the most, of the engine below the bottom of the hull. So that allows you to run really shallow. So shallow rocky rivers, shallow muddy rivers, shallow sandy rivers. People use them in saltwater flat situations. Anywhere you need a boat that can run really shallow and you don't have to worry about smashing your lower unit. So they work really well, rocky situations, muddy situations, shallow situations. Where they don't work that well, there's got to be a downside, right? It sounds perfect. Where they don't work that well are places where you have lots of leaves or grass or other things in the water that can get sucked into the intake. That pretty much stops it. Once you clog the intake, there's no water going out, the boat stops moving. Now, it's pretty easy to stop, turn the engine off, and clear the grates on the bottom and then you're back on your way. But if there's a lot of weeds, a lot of grass, a lot of leaves, you end up having to make multiple stops before you get to your destination. Another downside to these outboard jets is that you need a little bit more water to get the boat on plane. So you may have enough water if you're floating shallow to launch your prop-driven boat, but the outboard jet, just because it has to suck water in to give you momentum, when the back of the boat dips down, if it's not deep enough, then you end up sucking up whatever's on the bottom of the water. So that could be rocks, that could be leaves, that could be sticks. But usually you need a little bit more water to get your outboard jet boat on plane. Once it's on plane, it's going to run shallower than anything except for maybe an airboat. Okay, so why else would you not want an outboard jet drive? Probably the biggest factor is the loss of horsepower. So the ones we use typically are 50-35s or 60-40s. And what that means is that the power head is a 50 or a 60 horse power head. But when you swap out the lower unit and put the jet drive on, now it's a 35 horse or a 40 horse. So whatever size outboard you have, just knock off 30%, and that's what size jet outboard you have. So on our rigs, 50-35 means that we have an engine that weighs as much as a 50 horse, the fuel consumption of a 50 horse, but the performance of a 35 horse. So that's something to consider. So that's going to mean more fuel consumption, power loss. Downsides. Another downside is if you run choppy water, there's more of an issue with the jet drive because you have to position the intake pretty near the bottom of the hull. So if there's a lot of chop, then you're going to end up sucking in a lot of water in that jet drive, and that's going to cut down on power. That's going to cut down on speed. So jet drives typically are going to work better on shallow, flat water, which is what we find in a lot of rivers. Okay, so to wrap it all up, the outboard jet drive, it really is a specialized tool. There's situations where it allows you to do things that you could not do with any other type of engine, but there's situations where you're much better off with prop-driven engine. So I guess the thing you have to do is decide what are you going to do most often. Now, jet drives do work well in lakes. They do work well in salt water, but there's definitely a situation where it's the best tool for the job. Shallow, rocky areas, whether they be rivers, lakes, or saltwater flats, the jet drive is going to shine. Now, if you have to cover long distances, if you're going to be in deep water for most of the time, if you're in a situation where it's going to be weedy, then maybe the jet drive is not the best option for you. But it's just like life. There's always compromises. Anyway, if you have questions about these things, definitely drop them in the comments. Try to keep this short. There's so many other details that we could go into. Maybe we will later in another video. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. As always, if you hate the video, hit that thumbs down button 2 times. Subscribe to the channel. I'll see you in the next one. And in the meantime, good luck on the water.